Hello, YouTubers. This is another session in our series in developing OData Neo. Going to talk a little bit about that. We said OData next, but we're going to call it OData Neo. We're going to talk to the team a little bit about that. But I am joined today by my dear friend here, Sam Shoot, right? And the API architect for OData at Microsoft, Mr. Michael. Michael, how do I say your last name? Is it Pizzo?
Pizzo.
Pizzo,
Pizzo.
Pizzo. Nice to meet you, sir. So, we made a little announcement. I made a little post about OData. What we're planning to do. Sam and I have been discussing this for a while. We had some plans about making OData not just it's already awesome as a protocol. It offers a lot of capabilities, but also from an engineering standpoint, I want to revolutionize the engineering experience. I want it to be modular, pluggable, configurable. I want people to be able to just go in and be able to add in new capabilities, without having to kind of struggle a little bit through OData. And I learned a lot, like, just about 3 or 4 years ago when I started advocating for OData. A lot of people have been reaching out to me. I started to grasp a pattern, that the community, the .NET community need, in terms of OData. They want to be able to, mold the library to fit particular scenarios, which kind of begged for questions about, how do we architect, a variant of OData that allows people to add in new modules as easily as plug and play. Just, I want to build a library. It's at a marketplace, pull it down. You want to do fuzzy search, Michael? You remember when we're talking about,
Yeah.
doing a fuzzy search and all that kind of stuff. We wanted to allow people to kind of add these capability, but more importantly, there's also other things like transcendence and other things like, allowing in addition to the modularity, we want to allow people to transcend data through different microservices. So a service will hand over to another service to another service. So okay, so there's a lot of things to talk about today. Mike, do you wanna tell people a little bit about yourself, because you've only made two appearances, and I feel like I haven't done you any favors, like introducing you, with your experience and what you've done. You've been doing at Microsoft for a while. Do you want to go ahead and tell our audience here who you are and what you do?
Sure. Mike Pizzo. I'm an architect and engineering manager in the OData and API team, which is organized under Identity, which owns Microsoft Graph, which is one of the biggest OData producers and consumers, which is a fantastic place to be because there's a lot of support for what we're doing. I've been working on OData pretty much since the beginning,
Nice.
since before it was called OData. It went back when it was um, uh,
The
a
open
very,
protocol or
yeah, it went through. Actually, I have a slide that's all the different names that we named it before we actually got to Open Data or OData for short.
nice.
Um, it's been an exciting protocol all along. It's been exciting because it's from the very first design and meetings that we started to discuss this idea that we had. It was done in a very open forum. So we're
Hmm.
soliciting input from others. We're posting all of our design meeting notes and so forth. And it's been an open technology ever since. Microsoft kind of owned the pen for versions 1 through 3, and then we decided that in order to get more community input, we would actually open it up to standardization. And so, partnering with some other great folks, we created a technical committee within Oasis, and we worked on OData version 4 and have been working on that for a number of years, first publishing the first true standard version of OData, which then got accepted as an ANSI and ISO standard, and then
Nice.
also working on the 401 iteration of that, extending it to things like temporal and analytics and various other things. So there's a lot of exciting stuff that is continuing to go on. Uh, I'm particularly excited about this effort because it actually is a significant step in an evolution of the tools and libraries that we've built around OData. So when we first released OData, it was very monolithic. We had a server-side stack called WCF Data Services,
Hmm.
and you basically gave it an entity framework model, and it gave you the service. And it was very easy to use and very popular. but it was not modular at all. If there's anything you want to do differently than what the stack did, it was very difficult. And we did provide some hooks and so forth, but there were hooks within a monolithic stack as opposed to really componentized architecture. The client that we built for that was almost an afterthought. We were getting close to shipping the service that we'd been working on for a year and a half, and someone's like, well, it's a REST API, so you don't need a client. You can just call it with HTTP. But maybe we could do something a little bit more where it was integrated in with language integrated query and strongly typed classes. So we built that kind of last minute, and that really strengthened the early adoption of OData.
So
So
Michael, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say, so from that WCF data services,
Mhm.
we moved with web API into and API into more of a componentized architecture, but still uh, we had a lot of components, but they weren't really necessarily factored in such a way that you could use them in more dynamic situations. It was still fairly targeted towards specific scenarios. So with the client, we have a component that takes a link query and generates an OData request. We have serialization and deserialization components that know how to take the serialization off the wire and expose it as objects and vice versa. We've got components on the server that takes that query string and generates a link expression for it and is able to execute and serialize that back out. But they're not necessarily factored in a way that makes it really easy to support some of the new different scenarios that OData Neo are kind of targeting. So I'm excited to see OData Neo is kind of taking it to the next step.
So here's the thing. This is really exciting too because, do you feel like the way we're approaching OData Neo, do you think it would even influence the standard, like the protocol of OData? Because I wanna make this really clear for people. There is OData as a standard, right? It's not technology based. Anybody can implement it. You can implement it in Java, Golang, Python, whatever you want, whatever technology you want. And it's already happening across the board. Like SAP, is one of these biggest companies that provide, data service and whatnot. They use OData, Microsoft Azure, Blob Storage, Cosmos, SharePoint. All of these services are using OData. The World Health Organization is exposing OData, but it's not necessarily .NET and it's not necessarily C sharp. It comes in all different variations of technology. So I guess my question for you here is, do you feel like usually it comes from the top to the bottom? So the protocol happens and then people make their own implementations. We're shifting the implementation a little bit to make it more open for interpretation, for extension, open for extension, rewritable and configurable. Do you think at some point in time it can actually influence upwards in terms of the protocol? Right.
So the OData protocol is and always has been an open protocol, and we work on it through the standards, and it's a very active standards community. We meet every single week, and prior
Nice.
to COVID, we would meet in person a couple times a year. Looking very forward to having that resume sometime.
Uh-huh.
And it's all about taking the input from the community, from those implementing it, those consuming it, and making sure that OData is doing a great job of supporting the scenarios that people are using it for. So to the extent that we find new things that we want to add or extend OData in order to support these new scenarios that we're driving with OData Neo, I think that the committee would be very open to them.
That's
The
awesome.
protocol itself is designed in order to be extensible,
Hmm.
uh, and uh, and we have leveraged that a great deal over the years in growing the protocol and growing the types of models that we can represent and so forth. So I certainly see the potential for, I guess I would say I don't see the fact that OData is a standard protocol in any way limiting what we might want to do.
Awesome.
I think
Awesome.
I think that this is a very compelling and interesting use case for that protocol, and that we should be able to support that. And if there are tweaks and extensions we need, we have the venue for doing that.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, and as usual, I'm joined here by my dear friend Sam. Sam, you told me a little bit about, we're gonna need to go through, the post that I published recently and just discuss certain topics in there. Mike, we're gonna, take a look at what I published and, maybe just kind of
Yes.
clarify to people what are we doing, what kind of decisions we're trying to make. For the people watching this for the first time, this process is how engineers, basically come in terms with, developing, especially a new effort. You're gonna need to kind of keep that discussion open. You can't just, go and say I'm gonna run on my own and just develop whatever I want. You're gonna have to kind of, work with everybody so you can build something bigger than you and bigger than everybody else, in terms of results. So I'm just gonna go into the div blog here real quick. There's a lot of people blogging. We're on the second page now. We were on the first page for a while there. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna start picking up kind of, I kind of put like three priorities in terms of what we're really trying to accomplish, and these priorities are really community born priorities, like people coming and asking for things. Eventually you keep working with the community long enough, our brains automatically will start forming some patterns about certain problems, and then as an engineer, you'll start thinking about solutions, right? So this protocol agnosticism, you want to be a protocol agnostic solution, meaning that we don't want to be tied. A lot of people think like, oh, data equals ASP.NET, right? But I think it can extend way beyond REST, right? It can be for, I know it's already with SOAP, with WCF is basically SOAP, but protocols like gRPC, protocols like, let's say someone doesn't want to kind of send a query through an API communication at all. They just want to pass it through a command line. For instance, I want to be able to write a command line and I'm putting in my OData query and I want it to go hit the database and search for data. Whatever is underneath that, it doesn't matter. It could be SQL, it could be Cosmos, it could be NoSQL, it doesn't matter. OData itself as a protocol becomes the abstract layer that allows people to communicate with any storage, any data source, no matter what it is, even if it's just a file, with a common language. So what do you guys think about that as an idea? Do you see that being, well, first of all, is it possible, right? Is it
Mhm.
applicable? And second of all, how impactful can that be? I feel like we can leverage this in so many different things. What do you guys think? Go ahead.
So I'll go first. So when we took OData to the standards, one of our topics was how closely do we tie this to HTTP?
Uh-huh.
And in those conversations, we acknowledged that many parts of OData were not specific to HTTP as the underlying transport, um, and REST conventions and so forth. There are things like the query language by itself and
Mhm.
the serialization format, and the fact that really OData extends JSON with the ability to add comments
Mhm.
and 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 the modeling language for OData, the CSDL, actually came first out of Entity Framework.
Mhm.
So we realized that the components themselves could very easily be used in other ways. So we acknowledged that, and we said at the time that our focus was a particular target scenario, which was HTTP based. So the standard does reference things like get, put, post, patch, and delete, and talks about the semantics of those in an HTTP environment. But absolutely, we recognize from an early point that many of the individual concepts of OData could be reused in other forums. And I think a lot of the componentization of the libraries gives us the ability to do that, to break apart the language from the syntax of the payloads, from the modeling, from all these different pieces from the underlying protocol, and to be able to reuse those in very interesting ways.
That's awesome. What do you think, Sam? Do you
Yeah,
think we can?
I think
Go
I
ahead.
totally agree with the ideas here, and I do think what we have done in our current project or product uh, uh, accomplish that goal.
Mhm.
And what I am doing in the HO is to refactor the query binding
Mhm.
binder
Mhm.
to abstract the interface and
Mhm.
use the query binder for other, no matter dat- database or no matter how data source,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
use the query binder. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. Do you feel like, Sam, do you feel like with OData Neo, do you feel like it will be a lot easier for people to kind of, grasp and understand, how the code works in general and be able to, contribute to it and be able to kind of add their own protocols to it? If we break things apart into smaller and smaller components,
it
do you
depends
think?
on how design we will make and
Yeah,
how it
yeah,
depends on our implementation. And
yeah.
so maybe we can go through the components, and then we can at that time we can answer that question.
That's actually that's actually a good point. And while we're on this topic, I'm just gonna, open up the draw IO here real quick, and I want to first before we talk about, these little details, I want to share with you guys this. I'm starting this initiative, I'm working with you, I'm building this initiative with the intent that the software will be rewritable. We have for the longest of time, 20 something years now in the industry, I've always seen that sometimes we may be writing code with the intent that it will stay in stone forever and it should not change, right? And I think that's a mistake I've been doing in the past, and I realized I'm gonna write my code so it's so easy to understand that anybody could just go and say, hey, I can make this better. I can optimize this. I can make it faster, right? And in order for people to be able to do that, they have to be able to read and understand the code first, right? A lot of code is write only, right? Like it once it's written, it's there, but when you try to understand it, it becomes a little bit harder. So I'm gonna try to build, with Sam, I'm going to try to build OData Neo with the intent that I want people to look at it and say, we are a high demand team. We get about, 1,000 requests per second. And the current implementation of OData is so simple that we can unplug that core processing piece and plug in our own optimized, a version, and everything else should just work, right? That's a dream for a lot of engineers, but there's also this new pattern that I'm trying to solve this problem with, and this is where you guys come in and kind of help a brother out, and show me what you got to say about that. I thought for a while that if we make our component OData based on a substrate like it's like event sourcing, Mike, right? You're pushing a bunch of events in there. And there are a bunch of components that are very interested in these events in one way or another, right? These components may fall into one of three categories: something that is customer facing, like an API; something that does the processing, like a service. This is not like an API service, just a class that's called service that does some processing; or a broker that interfaces with external or native components that are not localized to our system. Like for instance, let's say we're relying heavily on IEnumerable, for instance, right? We want to localize that model. So if we decide to toss away IEnumerable and replace it with something else, it should be that simple. If we're relying on something that the .NET framework is offering, we want to wrap that up with a broker and give that broker a contract. And whatever is communicating with that broker could just take that broker out, put a new broker in, and continue to function as usual. So this guy here is the client. So you have clients or APIs. I'm going to call it an API. And you have a service and you have brokers. And all of these guys, from a dependency injection standpoint, from an integration standpoint, what people used to do is that they go and say, okay, just have these components talk to each other. I do that myself, right? But I thought to myself, what if these guys did not know about each other? Instead, they communicated with the substrate, right? And this substrate, I call it a lake house. I'll tell you guys in a second why I call it the lake house. There's a funny story behind that. But they're pushing events back and forth to this substrate. And at any point in time, if I want to go and say, I don't want this service anymore, I'm going to go replace it with another service, right? None of these guys will be impacted in any way, shape, or form because their point of contact will always, at all times, will be this lake house or the substrate. What do you guys think about that in terms of an implementation? This is, by the way, this is me putting myself and everybody else a little bit out of their comfort zone. Like I'm pushing everyone away and I'm telling them, oh, hey, remember that constructor with the dependency injection and you're calling your service? Well, you will still have dependency injection. It's going to be based on the substrate, but you're not going to talk to anything else. So this is like taking dependency injection to the next level, a little bit even further. Of course, there's a contract problem that we're gonna have to solve for. I'll talk about that in a second, but I wanted to see what you guys think about that kind of implementation. Do you think this would work? Let's go with Mike first. Go ahead, Mike.
Uh, so in computer science, we're all about levels of indirection, right? And so that's really what this is doing, it seems, is providing a level of indirection between the different components. And that gives us a level of pluggability. It gives us a common place for doing certain types of validation, for adding additional functionality and so forth. So conceptually, I think it makes a lot of sense. It does seem a lot like dependency injection. Which is not a bad thing. Dependency injection brings a lot of great pluggability to the framework. Just from this description, it seems like one of the primary differences is with dependency injection, you talk to your service container, it gives you a service, and then you talk directly to that service. Where it sounds like in this case, we'll continually, each of the components will always talk to the lakehouse,
Yep.
and then the lakehouse will coordinate. And as you say, in my mind, the first question that begs is, okay, what is the contract between the components and the lakehouse? How does it know that it is requesting data versus creating a request versus parsing versus whatever other pieces of work that it'll do? So I'm eager for the next foot to drop and find out about
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll answer that question. Let's see what Sam says, and then we'll come back to this one. I have so much to share about this. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I thought, if I'm starting, this new project and we're working together, let's just work with some really smart people and see what they have to say. And I think you guys gonna help me a lot, kind of tune in and, make this something that's really useful. What do you think about this lake house pattern, Sam?
I don't understand the fully about the lake house, but it looks like another dependent injection.
Yes.
And for our OData NxT, OData Neo, I do like we should build a pipeline and apply each query into the pipeline, and the customer can replace or insert its own query into the pipeline. So maybe we can think it more, but I like that, and but I need more time to understand the structure.
Absolutely. This is really kind of a dare, you guys, right? I'm daring this, right? Because if I'm gonna implement OData Neo the exact same way I implement everything else, that's boring. It's just boring, right? We want to try new things, right? We want to see how far we can push the envelope. And in that process, in the heart of that process, innovation might be born. We might innovate new patterns that people might be interested in. So going back to Mike here, so this lake house will offer a bunch of events. So there will be the contract. Let's go here and say this is a class here. Let's say this is my contract. The contract is, let's say this is a request. A request will have an event, which would be an enum normally, and a dynamic body. So the body will be any request of any type that's coming in through that pipeline, and that's your event there. Now there's something here. Normally people would say, I want to fire and forget because this is an event. It's like a queue, right? You're putting the message on the queue and you're saying, I'm done, right? What I'm trying to do here that's different is fire and observe. Fire and observe. And this is for synchronous operations. Like, I don't want to know who's making my cake down the road, but there's this waiter between me and the chef, right? And I'm waiting on this waiter to come back to me and tell me, here's your cake, here's what you order. I don't know who made that cake, but I'm waiting on the other side. Normally, like from an architectural standpoint, people say just put the event and forget it and return accepted and move on. And when we're ready, we're gonna contact you, right? The difference here is that
It
go
sounds
ahead, go
like
ahead.
it's a pattern like don't call me and I will call you back.
Something like that, something very
Okay.
similar to that. That's the fire and forget. That's the
Mm,
common one, right? Just put the message and forget.
mm,
Now I'm saying, okay, you're getting the event. Let's say this is an event and I'm saying, something like query, right? Let's say this is an event that's of type query, of or type select, or of type expand, or expand and select. You can add multiple events and you're fanning out to a bunch of services that handle that, and then they come back all back to you, aggregate back to you to the client, right? So let's say this is our library here. In general, let's say this is the library. This is OData Neo here. And it has all these components in it. I'm going to send this to the back a little bit. Okay, now, from a consumer standpoint, the consumer is going here and interacting with the API because they don't know any better. They don't know what's going on inside this body, right? And the API is sending a request, sending a message. Let me find a little message here. Is sending a message through that lake house like this. And then this message gets processed in here. A service picks it up, or whoever is subscribed to that event. So every one of these services will subscribe to a particular event. And as soon as the message goes in, the service starts processing it and then putting the message back to be returned to the API and then pushed out of the library, right? After the processing has happened. Our brokers will be responsible for feeding in whatever data source that the client is injecting. It could be an entity framework, it could be whatever the case may be is being injected, something abstract away from our service that OData itself is not strongly coupled and tied to it. It's a little bit of thought provoking, but that's how I'm thinking. You guys just push the message, have it processed, push it right back while this guy is still waiting, and then send it right back out. This way your API, let's say, Sam is coming in and saying, okay, this is service A. I also want to add to this query service B that will subscribe to the same event. And when this message is processed, because the lakehouse knows how many subscribers, it will wait on all of them, until they're done. Sorry, that's the draw IO is going crazy. But I'm gonna wait on them until they get done, and then once they're done, I'm gonna send that message back. So this message is going in here. Service A and Service B are both subscribed to that substrate. The message gets processed by both and then sent right back through the API. This way I can plug and unplug from that API as many services as I want to process that particular request. But not just that, I can have people publish NuGet packages that I can pull into my project, and this NuGet package will listen to that event automatically. So it's like on the fly, you have now a marketplace of people that saying, I want to add the fuzzy search capability, fuzzy search service, right? And this fuzzy search service, as soon as you inject this like extension methods, you just add it in, and then it hooks itself up to the lakehouse because you already have OData Neo installed. And as soon as the request comes in, boom, it gets processed and then shoots it right back to the consumer. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that's
uh,
a little
yeah,
wild west there? Go ahead.
now I
Go ahead.
understand. So it seems it's like the pipeline in my mind. So API accepts the request,
Yep.
whatever from,
Yep.
and create an event, put that event into the pipeline.
Yep.
The event will go one by one.
Yep.
And if any service registers into the pipeline, the service will catch the
Exactly.
message and
Hmm.
do some process.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll pass that message to the next service.
Exactly.
And when all the service are finished, we back to the API and send the response to the client.
Exactly.
Yeah, so lakehouse sounds like pipeline, and any service is just like plugging to the
Yep.
pipeline.
Yep. The only difference here is that any
Mhm.
normal pipeline just puts the message and they stop there. They be like, I'm done. This one, this one fires and waits. Like this guy's waiting. saying, hey, I'm waiting on this message. So I'm observing the message until the message is processed, until I'm going to take it back and hand it over to the customer, right? To the client, right? So, okay, Mike, what do you think?
Um, so, every new aspect brings up more questions. So
Yep.
this aspect of multiple services operating on the same message, of course, brings up questions. Is it serially or in parallel? And if it's serial, is there an ordering? How do you control that ordering? Um, uh, I'm also assuming that, in addition to the API being able to register events or send events to the lakehouse as part of the processing, service A could create a new message and
Yep.
send it to
Yep.
the
To send it
lakehouse.
to the broker. Yep.
Another component pick that up
Yep.
and so forth. So,
Ideally,
um,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead. Go ahead.
and so I'm sure you have some thoughts about those,
Yep.
and
Yep.
others are, things that we would figure out over time. But
So that's exactly right. And the components are being passed in the system. Like you can only build an exposure component like an API or a service or a broker. And each one of these have like you can build as many of them, but they have to fall within one of these categories. So the responsibilities are bounded by, what they're actually trying to function. Like a broker's main job is to kind of take away all external or native components that the library will be dependent on. But most importantly, you guys, all of these are replaceable. Like even this API itself is just another library that is exposing the services of OData Neo, but someone else could toss it away and create a new API or another API in addition to this one. Like someone could go here and say, I'm going to offer another capability. I'm going to duplicate that guy. Here's three more APIs that offer you more capability if you want this library. So you see, this is by design built to be rewritable and configurable. Now, to answer your question about the order, I don't know yet. I don't
I
know.
thought that's probably an answer, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's things that you work out over time.
Yep. So if we do it this way, you know, number one, I want to know what because I trust like when you guys have been in the tech industry for a long time. Like Mike, you were there when OData started. Sam, you've been supporting this technology and building new features forever for 7 years now, or maybe 6 years now. I want to know what your gut feeling is because that gut feel that's not necessarily logical yet can actually contribute a lot to our decision. Do you feel this is promising? Do you feel like we can actually accomplish something with this? Do you think it would work? What do you guys think?
Yes,
So,
it's exciting.
I like exciting stuff. That's what I live for. Okay.
so I think it can work. I think it's very ambitious, and I'm not afraid of ambitious stuff, but it does mean that we're going to need help. And
Yes.
I've been promised by Hassan that we have that help, that there is a community eager and willing to support this effort. And what I like about this is it makes it very easy to take contributions from the community because it's very easy to focus on one area and plug in logic for that to handle that one event as opposed to feeling like everybody has to understand the whole stack.
Absolutely. And this is the other most important part about this. Mike, let's say you only care about, let's say you're a real kind of you're a data scientist, right? You want to only care about, a particular portion of the system, and you couldn't care less about how to expose that service, and you couldn't care less about how to wrap external components. You can build that one tiny library, OData.Neo.Fuzzy Search, and publish it, and anybody can leverage and utilize this amazing capability that you built, and it's all yours. It's all you built it, test driven, it's functional, and you just put it out there, right? And whoever wants to consume it, they can just download it and it just works, right? Register it somehow, right? Now, speaking of the community, I want to share this with you. So I just put the idea out there. I really didn't think much, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't think much of it. I basically went and said, "Hey guys, I'm gonna open an issue on OData repository, the official repository, and I want to go and see what happens." So I just went there. I said, "Hey guys, I have a proposal. I have a little proposal here. What do you guys think?" And I kid you not, Mike, look, people started bombarding us with ideas for days and days. You know what that tells me from like a community standpoint? It tells me that people want this to work. They want it to kind of, not that there's anything wrong with what we have, they just want to have this kind of freedom to be able to effectively contribute. By the way, a lot of people like, there's a lot of really smart engineers out there. They've never touched open source. They've never been on GitHub before, right? And they just don't know where to start. Another aspect, another resolution I have for past year and this year is to allow at least one or two people to explore the open source space and be able to make something worth its while. So from a community standpoint, the data tells me something else, Mike. The data is telling me that we have a lot of people, that are really, really happy to contribute to this. In fact, actually, like what I really appreciate about this the most is that people started to actually question everything. And that's the beauty about engineering. They
Mhm.
start saying, okay, this transcendence pattern, which we will talk about in a second, what do you mean by that? What are you really trying to accomplish? What do you really try to achieve by this? So there's a lot of people. When we opened the, let me do this real quick. When we open, of course, we're #1 now on Google search. If you type OData NxT, boom, we're all over the place. In fact, actually, um, they just talked about us today at the Visual Studio magazine. They
Hmm.
published about OData Next, Microsoft Next Gen, and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. But the one thing I wanted to press on today is that people like let me go here to. By the way, guys watching us, we're changing the repository. We're gonna make it a part of the .NET Foundation. I'm super excited about this. But even in the issues here, I see people kind of saying, "Hey guys, I'm really excited. Let me know if anything I can help with." A lot of people really, just want to jump in and, in the most humorous of ways, they want to jump in and be able to help us. Okay, let's go back to let's go back. So you guys have a good feeling about, the lake house as an idea, right? Fire and observe. You're putting a message out there. This is a simple library, but I am hoping, Sam, that, I'm hoping that people will see this and they will use that pattern in other things too. I am hoping that they will make their own variants and their own implementations and hope, like, I'm trying to maximize the benefit, of building something like this as we go in terms of technology. Okay, so that's the substrate one. I talked a little bit here about what an API is. It's an exposure component, services, brokers, and all that. Let's talk a little bit about this guy. Let's
Okay.
start with Mike here. Let's start with Mike on this one. Mike, what do you think? I want to allow people to fan out, just fire a bunch of queries across the board, and then be able to collect and aggregate all of them back and respond as if it was coming from one service. That's our Turing test, right? I could have one service
Mhm.
or 50 services behind the scene, and the person that's consuming that API have absolutely no idea how this is working. I know that, you guys are doing this today already, like
Right.
Graph
Correct.
API.
Yes.
This is happening today, right? But we want to make it easy and simple and plug and play. I want a grandma in Nebraska to be able to use OData. That's the point, right? So so what are the opportunities that we have here, like in terms of implementation and architecture? Let's
So
start with Mike.
I
Okay.
think the opportunity here is great. As you say, Microsoft Graph does this. So Microsoft Graph, for those that are not familiar, exposes really almost every piece of information Microsoft has through a common API,
Mhm,
a common service, the Microsoft
mhm,
Graph Aggregator service. And that aggregator service does exactly that. It aggregates, it fans out to multiple different back end, what we call workloads. So there's, workload for Exchange and a workload for device management and workload for identity management and so forth. And it fans out to all those, gets the data, aggregates it together, and returns it. It's not a simple component. We have a whole engineering team that owns that component, that does that aggregation. We know that there are a number of other similar components. You mentioned SAP earlier. SAP has an SAP graph that does very much the same thing. There are various different backends, no OData, and then they've got a front end that receives OData and fans out to those various different OData backend services. So it's a very common pattern. It's a very, very interesting pattern. But today it's a very closed pattern. So people who implement this, they've got big developer teams that spend a lot of time doing just exactly this, but it's not a reusable component. So the idea that we can build something that other people can use to aggregate the data across various different sources is very exciting and a huge opportunity for us, I think.
That's awesome. What do you think, Sam? Thank you, Mike. Sam, what do you think about this aggregation situation? Normally in microservices, you're pushing a request, you're going to have to hit a gatekeeper, something that is protecting your architecture. And that gatekeeper somehow has to delegate, that query to different services. And Sam, Mike, I'm starting to see this pattern a lot. Like as I know that when we started, OData back in 2007, service-oriented architecture and microservices weren't really that popular, Mike, right? The people weren't really, it was just one big monolithic box, data center, right? And you hit the data center and it does the query for you. But the world has changed a lot. Thanks to Martin Fowler and these folks, they broke everything apart. And now we have, I think now there's like FIM2 services. Have you heard about that one? FIM2 services, like, a tiny, not even Lambda, a Lambda or an Azure function could have multiple functions in it. This one holds only one and one only. And then it lives and dies. It's all serverless. So it does its job and then it dies. That's it. Right? So it seems like things are trying to, especially with native cloud applications, things are starting to become more and more reliant on the cloud, right? They're putting things out there and they're saying, oh, let's spin up a bunch of Docker containers that does one thing and then it just dies. So anyway, back to Sam. Sam, what do you think about this in terms of transcendence, aggregation? One idea that I had just to visualize for you guys, and then we'll get to Sam in a second, is that if you're pushing a query, you can totally break down a query, right, Sam? Like if you have a three boxes like this, let's say you're going and saying, I want to be able to go and say, this is here my query, and I'm going here and say select and expand and order by, something like that, right? You can literally, this one statement, one query, right? You can literally ship those to three different services and then bring them all back into one statement as you go. Go ahead, Sam. What do you think about that?
So the service in your transit is the service in the first part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just event handler.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So different service can handle different query. So I
That's
think
right.
it's a extension of the first part, and I do think it can work.
But there's even no on this part in this part here. This is actually a microservice. Sorry, I'll update my. The term service is way overused in software industry. Yeah, this is like microservices. So imagine like you have a three different APIs.
Hmm?
All of them support OData. One of them owns, let's say, one of them owns a student storage, but
Hmm?
there's another one that owns the classes, like
Hmm?
classrooms, right? So
Okay.
you can go and say select where student ID is Sam, expand classes, and you want to know all the classes that Sam attends, right? You can ship that to two different services and get the details from two different services. Just like how I'm breaking this is how I'm visualizing this, and this is really preliminary, you guys. Before you start judging me for this is really preliminary. The query coming in like this, and you're going and breaking it apart. You're just shipping it out to a bunch of services. Now it gets more interesting when you have subqueries, right? So
Mhm.
imagine this, like you have this query like this, but this query itself is a part of another query like this that also has expand and all that. This is where things get really, really spicy, if you guys know what I mean, right? So, Sam, what's your take on this? What do you think about that idea?
It's great. So as Mike mentioned, the graph, it just really do like this. Um, but graph just creates the sub request and send the sub request to the workload, right? Mike?
Ah,
And creates its own query and its own using its own request path, combine them
oh,
together and format form a sub request and get the
okay.
response from workload and aggregation them together and form a final response to the client.
Yeah, that'll be hard for people to do. Like, think about, I always say, let's say someone that just graduated out of college, right?
Mhm.
This person might not have the technical experience, to understand how to break something apart like that, but they have a great idea. They have an idea that can change the world. The
Mhm.
easier we make technology for that person is, the faster it is for him to bring his idea out there to the world and change the world, right? So that's the engineering experience, right? Like there's a lot of scientists out there that I saw. Their brains, they can light up a continent. Like the amount of ideas that they have, they can power an entire continent, right? But they don't know the little technicalities of C sharp, .NET, OData. They don't know that. So if we make it more intuitive, if we're building tools for engineers, we want to make this plainly simple. Engineering at its core, just making it plainly simple that anybody can pick it up and say, oh, so I can just have a function that takes params. Like I can go something like this. Like I can go here and say, hey, let me jump real quick here to my notepad.
It
Just a
sounds
little.
like a service implementation, is not a library implementation.
Right. I want the library to have, see, it's modular, right? You
Mm.
can add a module in there that says this is OData Neo.aggregation,
Mm.
right? So you can go like this and say, hey, give me an array of queries, and I'm
Mm.
gonna go here and say get queries, and you pass in here something like the delimiter or separator. Like how do you want to separate this? How many levels? You can go here and say I want level one, just one level. So you're breaking it at one level, just at like when you say and. So select and filter and expand. Or you want to do it two levels. So you want to break it into more and more queries. Now that you have that array of queries, go ahead and ship it to any service out there, and then aggregate it back the way you want. Just a pseudocode, not super tight implementation. What do you guys think about that? We'll go back to this one. Good. Here you go. All right. There we go. So this is this part here. You're just aggregating, you're fanning out and bringing it back simple. Just give me an array of queries and I'll know how to ship it and send it to whatever API I want. Does that sound like something possible? Let's go back to Mike. Mike just Mike is like, okay, what's going on here? What are you guys
No,
talking about? Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go
no.
ahead.
So uh, I think our success depends on how advanced we want to be in this aggregation. And, I like that we're thinking about it as aggregation and not distributed query,
Mhm.
because distributed query can get very complex, whereas aggregation really allows you to have a lot of the benefits of pulling data together from disparate sources without having to get into kind of big sciencey stuff.
Yep, yep.
But in either case, you know the devil's going to be in the details on how we design this, how the orchestrator or aggregator knows about the different sources for the data and where to pass the individual queries to get them evaluated, and how we're able to perhaps leverage the substrate to do that. Can provide enough information in the message that the right components can say, hey, I know how to evaluate that query or that portion of the query. Let me pick that up and run with it and give you the answer that you need. So it's, as I say, it's a very exciting area and eager to see how it evolves. I don't think we're going to either design or communicate a design in 1 hour
Session.
podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
But the idea is great.
All right. This transcendence, thank you, Mike. This transcendence here is the last one. That's really old. These are the three main things that I thought about, at least as a start, Sam, as a start,
Mhm.
make it protocol agnostic, let's break down these components, let's make it modular, plug and play. Let's try this new lake house thing. Let me tell you guys why I called it a lake house. So one of my favorite movies in the whole world, is a Sandra. It's a Sandra Bullock movie called The Lake House, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of a reshoot of a Korean movie that's about the same thing. And the whole idea about the movie is that she is living in a house in 2006, and Keanu Reeves is living in a house in 2004. They're living in the same house. So when he puts a message in the message box, it shows up in 2006 somehow, right? So there is a point in time where she
I see.
stood there, she stood there in front of the message box. She stood right there at the post, and she put the message and waited. And I was like, that's it. That's fire and observe. She's waiting for the message to come back from 2004, right? That's why I just called it a lake house. Names come from all different kinds of
Right.
places. I thought it's a beta. We could call it something else. I found the nerdiest name for it would be a substrate. And then I found a little more pop culture name would be something like a lake house. But rolling back super quick to the topic, is there anything else? Because you guys have been doing this longer than I've ever done, protocol, agnostic, modularity and transcendence. Is there anything else that we can put as a priority, or is this a good place to start in terms of deliverables? I want us to kind of hit the ground running and make a huge impact,
Maybe
with this work.
let's quickly review the roadmap first,
Yeah.
then make
Oh,
sure
the
which one is
roadmap. Let's
the
go there.
first
Oh, yeah.
priority.
Yes. Here's the roadmap. Yeah. So this is a very, very preliminary initial roadmap. We want to first try to make an OData query turn into an expression, and then turn an expression back into a query so we can communicate it wherever, right? And then, from June to September, maybe we can start looking into modularization, like actually build a substrate and connect to the APIs and services. Because these two things, this piece here is everything. This is how we're gonna achieve protocol agnostic implementation. If we can break OData away from ASP.NET or an API RESTful communication, that's actually the hardest part. The rest of this is really easy, you know? And by hardest, I just mean time consuming. It's just going to take a little bit of time to kind of understand all the different, iterations. But building modules and breaking this into smaller expressions, that's super easy. It's already happening underneath in the expression implementation itself. We're just going to return a bunch of queries and say, okay, now you can convert those back into, a string query, or a raw. I'm going to call it a raw query. And anybody can just pick it up and run with it, whatever that implementation is. Our Turing test here would be a request that's coming to a console application, and this console application would send three different requests, one to an API, one to a WCF or SOAP protocol, and one to a GPRC service, and it comes back as if the console is running the entire process. If we do that, we would have hit all three priorities at once. Protocol agnostic, aggregation, and the transcendence piece, how it transcended the request all the way down to these services and back. Do you guys feel like this roadmap at least realistic a little? Maybe it'll change a little bit. By the way, this is not set in stone. That's just like I said, in the last session with Sam. I said you're just drawing a line in the sand and you're saying let's start here, right? But if we need, like, I care a lot more about building something that works than pushing something out the door real quick and then we pay dearly in terms of time and support, because once the library is out, it's out. People are gonna pick it up. Like someone just reached out to me and said, I released a new NuGet package. I said, great. Now be careful, because someone is gonna pick up that library and put it in a banking system where people are waiting for their paychecks to be processed, right? So if your library is not working, you're gonna feel bad. Like, even if it's open source, just because it's open source, it doesn't mean that it's out there in the wild, and who cares, man, if it breaks something else. That's where engineering, ethical engineering, you're really putting in your heart and soul and trying to actually build high level quality software, something that can withstand the test of time. What do you guys think about the that roadmap? It's really preliminary, nothing big. We can change it. You know, I'll give you the mic.
So my first observation is it seems almost backwards to build the components before we build the substrate. We
Hmm.
certainly can do it that way, and in fact, we currently have a lot of code within the various .NET libraries today for translating queries to expressions and expressions to queries. But just thinking about how we build those components, the first thing I think about is what is the API, or what's the contract for that component.
Hmm.
So what are its inputs and what are its outputs, regardless of whether it's called as a .NET API or through a message or however it's called. What's the contract? So
Hmm.
even if we don't build the substrate and so forth at the beginning, we need to understand what the contract is going to be for those components that we build.
I have an explanation for that. So because we're modularizing this, I want us at every single step of the way build something that the community can use today.
Mhm.
So if I build an OData query to expression component today and deliver it by April, someone can pick this up and go use it with their existing OData implementation. Like, they can actually benefit from it. So again, it's really focused on the people. Like, if I build the substrate, I'm focused first. If substrate has to be built, but if I build the substrate first, I'm focused on OData Neo, than the people that will benefit from it, because they're gonna have to wait all the way until December, maybe a little bit over, as usually software does, to get the full picture. But if I give them smaller, simple deliverables that still plays a role, that this I'm hitting two birds with one stone here in terms of delivery. I'm going and saying, here's a component that will actually convert a string into an expression. You can use it today, right here, right now. And this is also a part of a bigger project that will eventually allow you to do whatever you want. In fact, if I deliver these smaller pieces first, that means people are going to go use it and come back with feedback and tell me as I'm working on the next piece, hey, we found some bugs. We found some issues in this component. So the system is already being recycled and tested as we are marching through production and general availability. What do you think about that excuse? I kind of
Uh,
lawyering my way out of it. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
So I buy it to a certain extent. As I said, we don't need to necessarily build the whole substrate in order to develop the components, but we're going to need to understand what the contract is. So
Awesome.
for this component to be reusable, for anyone to use it, it needs a contract. It needs a system, a defined set of inputs and outputs, how you provide those inputs and receive those outputs. So we're going to have to understand that. And as long as we know what that is, you're absolutely right. We can be off and building it, and we're not blocked on the rest of the framework or substrate or architecture or anything else. So,
That's awesome. Sam, any feedback from your side?
Yeah, I like the iterations process,
Mhm.
and that's what I'm doing for the 8.0 repo. And to my side, what I'm thinking is we can ship initial uh, version and get the feedback from community
Yeah,
and get the contribution from community and move our product forward.
awesome.
But for the query to expression,
Uh-huh.
I just said we will do something at the end of the
April.
March.
Oh, or end of March. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, it's not. I mean,
if it's if
It
we
just
need,
from start from scratch, right?
yeah, yeah,
We needed to. I think we need more time or more resource to kick it off, and for the second part, since we have the first finished,
uh,
maybe we need more less time. But the
uh,
first part we need more time maybe. But we
absolutely.
can get
Mhm.
offline for that.
Yep, absolutely. And just so you guys know, there's no, this is just a preliminary roadmap. This
Mm.
is in no way, shape, or form telling people, oh, this is immediately what's going to happen. Just like game development, sometimes everybody was waiting on Halo, said we needed more time. People took more time and they made the game right, right? So this is exactly the same thing. Okay, so I know we're at the top of the hour, and I know you guys have meetings. I am hoping that we can kind of on weekly basis. Mike, I don't know if your schedule allows. I know Sam have graciously agreed to kind of cut some time of his day and come hang out with me on Fridays. And I want us to continue that discussion where we jump into, like, think about this session as like the high level. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to achieve. Here's our goals and ambitions. We can jump into the little details and think together, you guys, like think out loud, you know, how we gonna build contracts, how we gonna implement substrate, how we gonna do all these little details from an architecture sense. And since we have Mike now with us, I'm really excited about this, by the way, Mike. I'm really happy that you're jumping in with us. We kind of felt like a bunch of orphaned kids for a while there. Hey, you want to build the query to string? And now you jumped in and you were like, hey guys, how are you doing? I don't know, feeling cute today might help build a new library with you guys. So this would be great. If your time allows, I'd really love for you to come, hang out with us. We hang out every week. We record sessions like these, and we share it with the community, and people give us their feedback. Whenever your time allows. But other than that, anything else from you guys before I wrap up?
Yeah, I can join every week's sync meeting, but maybe Mike has other parts. Um,
Okay. I know Mike is super busy. He's a very, by
yes.
the way, guys, you guys watching us, this guy is a big deal at Microsoft, and he's sitting on, the one of the core components that power a lot, like the identity team is basically how every application at Microsoft is basically knowing who they are and what they are and communicating with each other. So I understand your time. I'm really happy you were able to join us. Uh, Definitely there will be emails going back and forth, discussions. I will open the discussion tab on GitHub so people see us going back and forth with each other. And I want all of this to be shared with the community. This is what I call building Microsoft on Microsoft in public. In public, like we're putting it out there and telling people, hey, you guys want to see how we build software? Let's talk about it, right? All right. Anything else from you guys? Any last remarks? Anything you want to share? I know you're excited. I know you're super excited. I am like super excited. I love new things. It's a problem. Shiny things. Anything else from your side?
Excited to see the community's response to this. So
Absolutely.
it's all about the community. That's why we do it. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Sam, anything else from you?
I will keep eyes on the videos,
Awesome. Awesome.
the
You guys,
LinkedIn and the YouTube.
and create a Twitter account, please. Mike, do you have a Twitter account or no?
I do. It's not very active, but
Okay, I just want your Twitter account so I can reference you. Just put a reference. I want to give credit where credit is due. I want to tell people who you guys are. You guys have been working really hard. I'm just a I'm just a consultant in this thing. I'm saying here, I'm saying, "Oh, it's a Friday afternoon. Let's play with OData." This is your life. Like this is your day-to-day, commitment. So I want to make sure that people know who you are and know who's behind OData and the great, amazing work that you guys have been doing across the board in terms of Azure services and also in the library. Also, our team and is our team in Kenya still around? Are they still working
oh
with
yeah,
us?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
amazing team in Kenya. I'm gonna
They're
try to
great.
bring these people
They're really
also.
great.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna try to bring them in. We have a great team in Kenya. Sam, has told me a lot about them. I met with them, for a while there. I want people to see who's behind OData. I don't want people to think OData is, Hassan is the one that's doing OData. That's not true at all. I am just I am, think of me as just a guy picking up the mic, and saying, "Oh, look at this cool thing," right? That's it. That's all I'm doing here. I appreciate you both. Thank you so much for joining me on a Friday afternoon. I know this is like your time off, but I'm looking forward to meet with you very soon. And for people watching us, I'm going to put links for the new repository on the under the .NET Foundation on the OData repository. There's a new team that Sam created. It's called the OData Neo team. This is the official name for it because OData NxT is just a thing that we put there as a placeholder. The team talked about this, and this is the name for it. I'm going to put the links in there. I'm going to put links for all the documentation, and hopefully we can see engagement from the community. We're going to kick the ball on this, and hopefully it will, we will be able to demo it maybe in .NET Conf or something, Mike. We'll take it out there and show the world how things work. Thank you all. For anybody else watching us, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. And as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in another video. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.